Hello, I've recorded this video in order to address a simple question with no simple answer. The question is, why did Brexit happen? Well, it's a question that has interested me for a number of years. That's because I am somebody who has a foot in both camps. I was born and brought up in the United Kingdom, of which I'm a citizen, but since 2015 I have lived and worked in the Republic of Cyprus, where I have family roots and origins. So I have to make clear at the very outset of this short video that I have a stake in both the United Kingdom as a citizen of the United Kingdom, but also as a resident of the European Union, of which I am now an ex-citizen. As I see it, as somebody who's been studying the process of Brexit for a number of years, and who has taken a much broader interest in both the politics and the law associated with Brexit, I would suggest that Brexit took place at 2300 hours Greenwich Mean Time on the 31st of January 2020 for at least three main reasons. The first reason is a political reason, which can be subdivided into a number of different strands. A second reason is a constitutional reason. There was no codified, embedded constitution of the United Kingdom that prevented Brexit from taking place. But there was also a very important legal reason associated with the process adopted by both the United Kingdom and the European Union in order to achieve the outcome known as Brexit. Now, I ought to just make the point here, what do we mean by Brexit? It's a relatively new word. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it ended the English language in approximately 2012 in the light of the then possibility that Greece would have exited the Eurozone and therefore would have achieved Grexit. Well, Grexit never happened. Greece stayed in the Eurozone. But the legacy of that Greek fiasco, if I can use that word, because it was a fiasco, the legacy of that Greek fiasco was the entry of the term Brexit into the English language. And what it now means is the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union, the organs of the European Union, and the general framework of the European Union, both in terms of its law and its administration. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, because Brexit has taken place subject to some strings attached to the exit, and they are set out in a number of agreements, including the withdrawal agreement that was brought into force in 2020, and that's a story for another day. My purpose today is just to focus on these three reasons and to try and give you an insight into why it was that the United Kingdom achieved this remarkable outcome, which very few people envisaged, and has had profound implications for both the United Kingdom and for the 27 remaining member states of the European Union. Let me begin with the first of the political reasons, and this is that Brexit took place on the back of the advisory referendum held in the United Kingdom and Gibraltar. That referendum took place on the 16th of June 2016, and I'm citing here the statistics, the official statistics published by the Electoral Commission on the 20th on September 2016. A total of 46,501 people registered to vote in the advisory referendum held on the 16th of June 2016, and 33,577,342 votes were cast, representing a turnout of 72.2%. The outcome of the referendum was as follows: 16,141,241 people voted to remain voted for the UK to remain a member of the EU. That's a percentage of 48.1% of all voters who voted. and 17,410,742 people voted to leave the EU. That is to say 51.9% of all voters who voted voted to leave. And there were 25,359 rejected ballots. Now, the first point to note here is that this was a UK-wide referendum in which the citizens of Gibraltar, British Overseas Territory, took part. The second thing to note is that even though under the Scotland Act and under the Northern Ireland Act, the UK Parliament has recognised that there is a separate people of Scotland and a separate people of Northern Ireland, and indeed there are devolved organs of governance in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well as in Wales. There was no subdivision of the referendum process. There was a unified, integrated referendum covering the whole of the United Kingdom. And when Theresa May eventually served what was known as the Article 50 letter on President Donald Tusk of the European Council, one of the organs of the European Union, she declared that the referendum result was a manifestation of the self-determination of the people of the United Kingdom and also a manifestation of their democratic will. Now, the point that I want to just stress here is that there was a relatively thin majority in favour of the UK leaving the EU and a substantial minority in favour of remaining in the EU. But basic principle of democracy is that the majority view should normally prevail, subject to appropriate safeguards put in place for the minority. So the Leave voters had the democratic mandate to call for the implementation of this result. Now, I want to just stress here, as the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom held in one of the Miller cases, the first of the Miller cases, this was an advisory referendum. It was not binding upon either the UK government or the UK Parliament, but it nonetheless gave huge moral force to the campaign in favour of the United Kingdom exiting the EU. Now, let me just look at some of the deeper reasons why so many British people voted to leave. Well, I'm just going to give you a number of reasons. Well, one of the reasons is that these are the political reasons I've got to stress. I'll turn to the constitutional and legal reasons a little bit later. But one of the main political reasons is that prior to the referendum, many British citizens, I have to say I was one of them, harboured grave reservations about the process of creating an ever closer union. That phrase is found in Article 1.2 of the Treaty on European Union, which is the governing, one of the governing legal instruments of the European Union, and it's 28 member states in the pre-Brexit epoch. If one reads Article 1.2, one finds the following provision. This treaty marks a new stage in the process of creating an ever closer union among the peoples of Europe, in which decisions are taken as openly as possible and as closely as possible to the citizen. Well, many British citizens recoiled at that. They regarded this process of ever closer union as a mechanism by which state sovereignty would be undermined, whereby boundaries or borders would be knocked down, and whereby there would be a centralisation of power in Brussels in favour of the EU institutions at the expense of the democratically elected institutions in London, primarily the UK Parliament and indirectly the UK government. So this was something that many British citizens felt uncomfortable with. This uncomfortable relationship with the process of ever closer to the union was manifested in the pre-Brexit epoch by the decision of successive UK governments to avoid entering the Eurozone. That's why in the United Kingdom we maintained the pound and we didn't join the Eurozone. And partly as a result of that, the United Kingdom avoided the catastrophes, the financial and economic catastrophes that befell member states of the EU that were locked into the Eurozone. I'm thinking here of Italy, Greece, the Republic of Cyprus, for example. So that was one of the many political motivations behind the thinking of many of those who voted in favour of the UK leaving the European Union. The second reason flows from what I've just said, that prior to the referendum, many British citizens were simply horrified by the stance of the European institutions during the Eurozone crises in EU member states, such as the three I've just mentioned, Italy, Greece, and the Republic of Cyprus. There was a feeling that the European Union and the Eurozone institutions in particular were acting in an arbitrary, unjust and unethical manner. This was symbolised by what William Cash MP, a leading Eurosceptic conservative and also a solicitor by profession, said in the House of Commons on the 18th of March 2013. This was when the Cyprus dimension of the Eurozone crisis was at its height. He asked the following question to one of the ministers in Her Majesty's Treasury. The minister will no doubt appreciate that Mr. Draghi's comment that the European Central Bank will do whatever it takes clearly includes daylight robbery of British pensioners in the Republic of Cyprus, among others. Does he, that is to say the minister, agree that this is symptomatic of the dysfunctionality of the European Union? Now, what we were seeing, I was in the United Kingdom at the time, what we were seeing here was that there was effectively daylight robbery, to use the phrase of Mr. Cash, taking place in a European Union member state with the so-called haircut. That is to say, the taking of, effectively the taking of money from persons who had bank accounts in various banks in the Republic of Cyprus, and that was all part of the rescue package that the EU and its institutions, and more specifically the Eurozone institutions, put into place to rescue, in inverted commas, the Republic of Cyprus from the mess it found itself in by joining the Eurozone. Now you might ask, what does all this have to do with the United Kingdom? Well, it has everything to do with the United Kingdom, because British citizens were just seeing unelected bureaucrats such as Mr. Draghi, who was the head of the European Central Bank at the time, effectively dictating the economic and financial and, I would add, political destiny of European Union member states. And many British citizens responded by saying, well, we don't want to have anything to do with this organisation or this arbitrary and unjust method of operating. And it's no accident, I would suggest, that the referendum in the United Kingdom took place in 2016. That is to say, just 3 years after the disaster that befell the Republic of Cyprus in 2013. There is a correlation between the Eurozone crisis and the outcome of the Brexit referendum. There's another related political reason why many British citizens objected to the European Union, and that was the sense that the EU and its presidents in particular lacked democratic legitimacy. Here are the two gentlemen who were acting as president of the European Commission and president of the European Council at the time of the referendum. On the left is Mr. Juncker, and on the right is Mr. Tusk. We just, in the UK, those of us who were of the Eurosceptic political persuasion in the pre-Brexit epoch, we just were looking at people like this and asking ourselves, well, where do you gain your democratic legitimacy from? I certainly didn't vote for either of these people. I may have voted for, in the UK parliamentary election that led to the formation of a UK government that was involved in the process by which these two gentlemen rose to power in Brussels, but I certainly didn't vote for them, and many of my fellow UK citizens didn't vote for them directly. And yet these were the two figureheads who were the driving forces, or perceived to be the driving forces, of the European Union. I was always struck by what Tony Benn, the left-wing socialist and very principled Labour MP, said in the House of Commons on the 22nd of March 2001, "I'm not a socialist, but many people felt that Tony Benn was on the right lines when he said the following." He used to say this quite often, I have to say, but this is what he said on one particular occasion in the House of Commons. He was speaking generally here rather than about the European Union, but this reflected his own Euroscepticism from the left of the political spectrum. "In the course of my life," Mr. Benn, the late Mr. Benn said, "I've developed 5 little democratic questions. If one meets a powerful person, whether it's Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, or Bill Gates, ask them 5 questions. What power have you got? Where did you get it from? In whose interests do you exercise it? To whom are you accountable? And how can we get rid of you? If you cannot get rid of the people who govern you, you do not live in a democratic system." Now, this reflected the Euroscepticism of Mr. Benn on the left, but there were also Eurosceptics on the right, and this is something that's very important to understand in terms of the politics behind Brexit, that there were people on both the left and the right who were Eurosceptics, who later became supporters of Brexit. And the questions that Mr. Benn put in the House of Commons in March 2001 could equally be asked to the 2 gentlemen that I'm showing on this slide, Mr. Juncker and Mr. Tusk, the 2 presidents of the European Commission and European Council, respectively. And there was a sense, therefore, this is the point I'm making, there was a sense that the EU lacked democratic legitimacy, as symbolized by the ways in which these 2 men rose to the very top of the EU system. Let me now turn briefly to the constitutional reason why the UK was able to exit the European Union, and that was that there is no codified constitution in the United Kingdom embedding or entrenching certain provisions that would have made the process of Brexit difficult or impossible. We have a system of governance which is founded on parliamentary sovereignty that in turn rests on the idea articulated by Professor Dicey in the Victorian epoch that Parliament may make or unmake any law whatsoever, and no institution may declare that the legislation or the primary legislation of Parliament is invalid. That gives the UK Parliament a free hand to adopt any legislation it wishes. That's subject to political and other non-legal constraints. But the point I'm making here is that there was no constitutional or no domestic constitutional impediment to prevent Brexit. And this was effectively underlined by the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom in the first of the 2 cases involving Gina Miller, which reached the Supreme Court in 2017. In its judgment in the first of the 2 Miller cases, the Supreme Court held, where, as in this case, implementation of a referendum result requires a change in the law of the land and statute has not provided for that change, the change in the law must be made in the only way in which the UK Constitution permits, namely through parliamentary legislation. Now, that was the principle that the Supreme Court upheld in the first of the 2 Miller cases, and that was because at the time the then Prime Minister Theresa May was trying to use the prerogative power of the Crown to activate the Brexit process, and the Supreme Court said, no, there's a pre-existing statutory scheme in the form of the European Communities Act 1972 that acts as a domestic legislative impediment, and therefore a new Act of Parliament was necessary to overcome the pre-existing domestic legislative impediment. And that resulted in the European Union Notification of Withdrawal Act 2017 that authorised the then Prime Minister Theresa May to activate the Brexit process via Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union. That resulted in subsequent legislation, including the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018 and other related legislation that paved the way for Brexit to take place eventually. at 2300 hours Greenwich Mean Time on the 31st of January 2020. So that's a very important constitutional reason why Brexit was able to take place. And lastly, there was a legal reason. And the legal reason is associated with two interrelated legal realities. The first legal reality is that the United Kingdom entered the then European Economic Community in 1973 pursuant to a legal process that had both a domestic dimension and a European dimension. So what we had prior to accession in 1973 was a domestic legislative process culminating in the European Communities Act 1972, and we had a European legal process which culminated in a prior legal text, the Treaty of Accession of 1972. So the United Kingdom entered the European Union by means of a clear-cut legal process with both domestic and European dimensions. And in the subsequent years, the relationship with what became the European Union was locked into law. That's partly because one of the founding values of the EU is respect for the rule of law. But ultimately, Brexit took place according to legal means, on the one hand through the domestic legislative system of the United Kingdom, and on the other hand through the legal procedures of the European Union. Hence, for example, the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018, which was an act of the UK Parliament, hence also the EU-UK agreement, withdrawal agreement, which resulted in the EU Withdrawal Agreement Act of the 23rd of January 2020. We entered into a transitional period that came to an end at 2300 hours Greenwich Mean Time on the 31st of January 2021. There's a typo there, that should be 2021, and that completed the process of Brexit, subject to various strings, and those strings are embedded in the withdrawal agreement and the free trade and cooperation agreement and a number of other agreements. And I thought I'd just end on a legal note, having given emphasis to both political and constitutional points. The legal point is the one that how can I put this? It was nicely articulated by Geoffrey Cox, QCMP, the then Attorney General of the United Kingdom, on the 15th of January 2019. In the House of Commons, he said the following: "We should not underestimate the legal complexity of our disentanglement from 45 years of legal integration since the accession of the UK to the then EEC on the 1st of January 1973. 45 years of legal integration have brought our two legal systems, i.e. of the UK and the EU, into a situation where they are organically linked. To appeal to those who have a medical background, it's the same as if we were to separate from a living organism with all its arteries and veins, a living organ, a central part from this body politic. We cannot underestimate the complexity of what we are embarked upon doing." And that legal complexity is reflected in those legal texts that I've just mentioned. The examples are the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018, the EU Withdrawal Act 2018, which preceded the other one, and then we've got the various EU-UK agreements. Now, that is all an overview, a very brief overview as to why Brexit happened. So to sum up, what have I tried to do in the last few minutes? What I've tried to do is explain to you that there was a political reason why Brexit took place, and that political reason can be subdivided into a number of sub-reasons. There was a very simple constitutional reason, and that was associated with the United Kingdom's flexible constitutional system that does not have an embedded constitution. And there was a legal reason. The United Kingdom entered the then European Economic Community by law, and the United Kingdom exited the European Union by law. I hope that's giving you an insight into why did Brexit happen? Clearly, there's a great deal more to read and learn about this subject, but if you learn anything from this video, remember one thing, and the one thing is democracy matters. Democracy matters, but equally democracy is interlinked with the rule of law. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.